The nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik, and I will be your host for today's Nonprofit MBA podcast. And we've done over 300 of these episodes. And I'm driving along yesterday, and I'm like, I do the same intro every single time. Maybe it's time to start dressing it up, and and so that's my dress up. No. For those of you who don't really know me, I am the co-founder of Financing Solutions. And over the last 14 years, Financing Solutions has been the largest provider of lines of credit to small nonprofits in the United States. Line of credit for nonprofits getting a line of credit is really hard to get. And if you go to a commercial bank, they're not going to say yes. And so that's the segment that my business is in as far as providing those lines of credit. They're very valuable. They're great for uneven cash flow. And if you think you're unique to that, you're not. Every nonprofit has issues with cash flow. And so that's what we do. If you're interested in learning more about it, please visit us at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And today I'm very excited to be speaking with Jen Esparraza from the Jen Advantage. Jen is coming us from, I hope it's sunny California. Is it sunny there right now?
It is very sunny right now.
Okay, just outside Sacramento. And that's like the first thing I ask my guests all the time is like where they're calling in from, because it's interesting. It's just certainly interesting. And so today we're going to be talking about telling your nonprofit's story despite budget and time constraints. And a little bit about Jen. Jen has spent her career immersed in the creative industry, leading marketing efforts for a diverse range of campaigns from government programs to children's theater. And as the owner of a marketing agency that specializes in helping nonprofits and small business, Jen is deeply committed to empowering business leaders and helping them succeed. She is also the author of Marketing Basics for Your Small Business, and it's exciting to share the newly released Marketing Basics for Nonprofits. Jen, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA podcast.
Thank you for having me.
What do you think the correlation is, the similarities and the differences are between marketing for a nonprofit versus marketing for a small business?
Great question. So I think if you're running a good nonprofit, hopefully you are running it like a small business. There are still rules you have to follow, whether it's with reporting financially or with HR and legal issues and all of that. But the difference is really, and that's why I wrote the two separate books, the differences happen. One with funding is that funding is just different. So you're not selling a product necessarily and getting income that way. Your funding shifts, kind of what you were just talking about. Your funding shifts whether or not you're getting grants, whether or not you're getting donors, what the economy is, whether it's an election year, like there's all kinds of factors. So the way that their income comes in is very different. And then also the way they're staffed. Oftentimes they're run highly likely by volunteers, and those volunteers come in and out with seasons. So really creating any kind of continuity can be challenging because they're in a constant, influx of new people. So those are, I think, the really big challenges that nonprofits have that are different from a small business.
Yeah, we were before we went live on air. Jen and I were talking about the topic as far as how we word it. Originally, the topic started off with the word marketing, and I was concerned with the idea that marketing isn't really something that nonprofits do. So, Jen, when you think of marketing for a business, I mean, what's the reason why businesses market?
You're trying to get the word out about who you are and what you do and why somebody needs your product or your service. So that's anything from a coffee shop needing to say, we have the best coffee, come drink ours, or, we are a plumber and we're here whenever your drains get clogged. And this is why we're the best ones to choose. So whether you're a nonprofit or you're a small business, you're telling a story about who you are and what you can do for them, like how you can solve your client's problem and why you'll be, the one they choose.
Yeah, fair enough. And then, I don't think nonprofit. Now, when you apply it to a nonprofit, what is marketing for a nonprofit?
So often I love that you're asking this because marketing can mean something different to everyone in the room. So they could be thinking of Google advertising and SEO on a website. Others might be thinking about more of a digital presence of just your Facebook and Instagram. Others are thinking about a newsletter, and those things are all correct. And so I think it doesn't matter really what your definition of marketing is, so long as we can all agree that if nobody knows what you do and who you are, you're not going to be successful.
Who do you think the client is when you're talking about marketing for a nonprofit? I'm kind of thinking it's more. Well, you would have volunteers if you're trying to market, to try to get more people involved in your organization, which I don't think a lot of nonprofits are going to do, especially the smaller ones, like someone under 5 million in revenue a year. But of course, you're also fundraising, right? And so you're doing that. You might even be. Well, I can't really see a marketing out for grants. Marketing to me is a little bit more proactive, but I can certainly see where you would have it in your literature when you go to submit for it. So today, let's dive into the idea of getting the word out, telling your nonprofit story, despite any budget and time constraints. So what are some of the things that you would suggest to people who are really trying to tell their nonprofit story?
So I think there's a misconception that if you're a small nonprofit that you can't do marketing, like it's beyond your grasp because you're small. And that's definitely not true. There's many, many free things out there to do or low cost, which is part of why I wrote my book, because so many people just feel stifled, like, oh, I can't do that, or I already have too much on my plate. And my book is literally like 150 pages. So it's truly the basics. There's not any of this crazy jargon going down rabbit holes of testing different things. It's very basic so that somebody can read it and go, oh, this is, the first half of it is an evaluation of like your mission and your branding and who your audience is. And then the second half goes into all of those tactics. So it gives somebody just a very basic overview of like what they can do. And it's a $15 investment rather than thinking I have to go hire a marketing agency that's going to cost me thousands. And then like that, when people think that, they just shut down. So for one, finding a resource, of course, like my book is a very inexpensive way to at least like make some headway. But I think for nonprofits, the most impactful and it's very low cost and like low barrier to entry is email. And of course, it depends on what you do, but social media is great because it's free and you can put it all out there, but you don't know what the algorithm gods are going to do today and who it's going to land on and who's going to actually see it. Whereas when someone sends an email, I know if I email you, it's going to get in your inbox. Now, like what you do with it is another story. And that's, more of the refining what's actually in your emails. But it's definitely a great way to actually reach somebody one-on-one. And if you have an email list of 300 people, of 500 people, you're reaching all of them at once. Whereas if you post something on Instagram, you might have hit 20 of those people.
Is there a certain methodology you would start off? Let's just say someone's an executive director who's listening to this today, and they say, we've done no marketing at all, and it's something that we maybe should take a step back on and do. Is there a certain amount of steps or a methodology that you would suggest that you follow to make sure that you are going to do a good job in this area?
Yeah. So really determining who their audience is, of who they're talking to. And nonprofits, they're already stretched for time and for, finances. And then they actually have two audiences that they need to make sure they're hitting. And one is the people they serve. So whether or not it's, they're out there doing sports for programs for children, or they're doing mental health or rescuing dogs, whatever it is, they need to talk to that population. But they also have an audience of the people who are their donors and their volunteers in the community, of how to attract, those folks. So really doing your homework. Your audience is not everyone. Like, just because you rescue puppies doesn't mean everyone is your audience. Like, it's really important to narrow down on that. And I have an exercise in my book of that, but you could also Google it, like customer personas. And you can really do a deep dive. You don't need to go into super deep dive on this, but it's just so important to know who you're talking to, because if you figure out that your donors fit in this little, box, but, if all your donors are women that are around 30 years old, but you're spending your time setting up booths at golf tournaments, like that's probably not where you're finding your donors. So really understanding who your audience is like the first thing I would do, so that any message you put out there, that they're going to, for one, be there. So if they're on Instagram, you're on Instagram, whatever. And then that it actually resonates with them and makes sense to them.
Yeah, I like what you said too in the beginning, which, I think we see it all the time with executive directors who are running around ragged, trying to do everything. And they're sitting there. And if they're listening to this podcast, they're like, oh, great, another thing on my agenda. But my argument would be if you can narrow down who your customers really are and really get finite on it, it will give you back time, not
Absolutely.
cause you to have more time. And the more experienced people I see, whether they be executives or executive directors, they know how to focus their energy on things that are really going to pay off. And the least experienced people I see try to do everything for everyone. And, honestly, what happens is when you keep running against the wall and hitting it a lot, you finally take a step back and say, wait a minute, there's got to be a smarter way. So I completely agree with you. I mean, Financing Solutions, although it's not a nonprofit, although I've been on boards for nonprofits, it's the very first thing that I do is say, who is our customers? And I try to narrow it down as small of a piece of pie as we possibly can. Because the reason for that is then you really figure out what your marketing strategy would be for that. And you mentioned the word customer persona, and that's that whole right. Is that the right?
Yeah, customer persona.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It didn't sound right when I said it. What that is, it's the characteristics or everything that makes up the target customer that you want. So think if you're dating, right? You kind of have a little bit of a picture of who you want to date. And, and there's certain criteria, and it's just as important to decide who you want to date as it is the type of people that you don't want to date. Right. So, I would say, that will really help you narrow down. Well, that's what you do in regards to the customer persona, is you kind of really get it down. So after you do that, what's the next step?
The next step is when I would work on your messaging and your branding. So branding meaning, most everybody has a logo. So they think of their logo and hopefully they've got maybe some kind of colors that go along with that. And if they don't, they make a decision of what that's going to be. Using a tool like Canva. Are you familiar with Canva?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, so Canva is like graphic design for dummies. It's the best tool out there, and nonprofits can actually get it for the pro version for free. So it's a great deal for nonprofits. But there's all these templates you can use to create like social media posts or create flyers. And I've seen so many nonprofits or just small businesses, anyone, they go crazy with the templates. And so today their flyer is, bright blue and green, and then tomorrow it's pink and black. And there's no continuity of this branding. So really to be able to like constantly create an impression on people, and so that every time they see your logo, they see your colors, they see the fonts you use, you're making impressions so that they recognize you and they start retaining the messaging. So getting their branding dialed in, which is literally it is as basic as your colors, your fonts, and your logo. I mean, you start simple with that. So that there is just a recognizability, whether it's a business card, it's the website, it's a flyer you hand out, that each time you make an impression on someone, they're like, oh, that's right, I met you at that Chamber of Commerce event, or, oh yeah, look, this event's happening and I've, seen this place before. And then the messaging. So really and the first part of my book really deals with that too. And when I work with clients, this is what I do for them, is determining like really what is your messaging? Like what is your value proposition? Why should they use you? Why should they use your services? Or why should they donate money to you? What makes you stand out from every other, sex traffic rescuing, mission, after school programs for children, saving the puppy dogs, whatever their nonprofit might be, what makes you different? And helping them really dial in on what that is. Like I met somebody who was from Meals on Wheels, and we had to do this exercise at this conference. And so she had to just tell me her name and what she did. And it was very basic, like, oh, we serve seniors who are, below a certain income level, and we bring them food. And that was it. And I think we get very complacent when we just talk about what we do. Like I go, oh, I do marketing for small businesses and nonprofits. Like I'm guilty of it. But then the second step was like, so what? So what that you do that? Like, tell me why I should care. Tell me why it matters. And the second round, this woman's face lit up and she gave me statistics about, how many people in the Sacramento area were, falling under this income level and they were single and they didn't have, they were housebound and they're the only organization doing this. And she just went on and on. And by the time she was done, I'm like, where do I send my check? So it was really her getting to the meat of like why this is important and really the specifics of what they do and, all of that really resonated. So it's helping people dig a little deeper. Like it's not just the basics of what they do. Oh, we offer, veterans counseling. Well, so what? Like, get me excited about it. Tell me really why this is important. And that's the message you have to tell your people.
I wanted to ask you the question. I'm a big proponent of like execution. I think so many times you roll out this project. Let's say you worked hard on this marketing project, and it was really good, and then all of a sudden, it's like you think you need to move on to something else when you got to make sure that you're executing really well on it. What do you tell your clients after they've done all the work of really identifying their customer persona, to coming up with their messaging, to getting out the message in the to the channels that they think is the most effective? What do you tell your clients to make sure that they're executing on their plan?
So before we execute and do anything, I want to make sure that we actually have a way to evaluate whether or not this is going to work. I don't want somebody sending out a bunch of flyers. I don't want somebody doing a bunch of social media posts if we don't have a plan in place to actually evaluate if this is working.
Yep.
I had somebody I was working with, and they sent out all these postcards. This was a business, but they're like, yeah, we really hope it brings in some more business. And I was like, well, how are you tracking it? And, the eyes got glassy. What do you mean? And like, there was no QR code. There was no like coupon, show us and mention this coupon for a discount. There was nothing for them to actually track if it worked. So before we implement anything, I want to make sure we've talked about how we're going to track this, because while I might do this full evaluation and have some great ideas of how this is going to go for you, unfortunately, part of marketing is trial and error. So we're going to try this for a while, and then let's see if it's working. And if you're sending emails and no one's clicking on the links, or they're unsubscribing, we need to reevaluate why that's happening. Instead of just, okay, we're going to stop doing that then and turning to the next thing. There has to be built in an evaluation tool in there to make sure we can figure out, like, to get to the bottom of what really needs to be done.
There's an old adage, and that is, if you can't measure something, you can't manage it. So what you should be doing, and Jen, you're absolutely right, is, and let me be very clear as to what you want to make sure you're not just measuring this. Like, let's say, oh, well, we know how many people clicked on the website. Well, how many of those turned into customers? And or donors or whatever it is that you're looking for, and out of how many of those donors, what gave, how much, say donors, how much did they give, and how did they find you through that channel, and how long did they give for? You want to get really granular with all this stuff so that so you can be able to evaluate the channel, because I would tell you from my experience, you want to be able to see if the money that you've spent has been worthwhile, or the time that's spent. And guess what it is? It's customer acquisition costs. And it's also how much they've, given to your organization in this case. Because I'm going to tell you right now, you're more than likely going to have to evaluate the channels that you're using and get rid of quite a number of them.
Well, and that's why I think it's really important to set specific goals. So it's not just, oh, we want to start marketing. Well, again, like why? Are you trying to get more donors? Are you trying to get more volunteers? Do you want to serve more people? Are you trying to reach a new population? Are you trying to get more from the donors you have? Like, we really need to set specific goals so that you understand what it is you're measuring. Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter how many clicks you got, like you said, if it didn't actually, nothing came out of it that you were actually hoping for. So that's another issue I see, is that they just think they need to go out and do these things. And then their goals aren't being achieved and they're still frustrated, but marketing truly can, people say, I need more money, I need more volunteers, I need more business, and marketing can help all of those things. You just have to be specific about those goals in order to create your marketing around them.
Yeah. It's pretty simple stuff. And I'm saying we're not reinventing the wheel here. And, the methodology for the steps is, you could Google it and you'll say, and then all you need to do is follow those steps. And, the hard part isn't coming up with the steps. That's already been done. It's putting your creativity into it, finding the marketing channels, doing all of that. And somewhat and that's actually the fun part too. I mean, I'll tell everybody the story. I met a guy, his name is Robert Bloom. And Robert Bloom is I think he's passed away now. He was the original owner and ran the largest advertising agency in the world, which was Publicis at the time. And he wrote a book in his 80s called The Inside Advantage, and I read it, and it was really good, and it was marketing related, and it really talked about how building your branding, how it influences everything throughout your organization, and including your marketing, and how that is your inside advantage. And companies that he studied and that he ran, he saw that companies who had a very strong brand, that they worked on it all the time, had an advantage over everybody else that's out there. And so we took that book, and very short book, and we followed it as a team and came up with our branding strategy from that book. And It was the best project I ever worked on. And the reason was everything was already there. So if you look at Jen's book that's coming, is your book out already, Jen?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Or if you bring Jen on, now we ended up bringing Robert on as a consultant to us. And, it was such an advantage. It was the best project I ever worked on. And we really did some good stuff. And so that wasn't for Financing Solutions. This was for another company I had. And so my point being is, you can easily take one of Jen's books. You could easily bring on Jen, really get this down. And what I saw was our company became so much more efficient and effective at so many different areas. And we just grew tremendously because of it. Jen, after you do the steps, at what point do you start to, we're in the execution phase. What comes after the execution phase? I would assume it's evaluation phase. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, determining how you're going to monitor this and your whatever you are evaluating, and then what you're going to be your plan from that. So how long are you should be monitoring it on a regular basis. But if the first email doesn't go well, then what is your plan for round two? So there's this constant refinement. And I think I want to go back to what you were just saying, because you hit on something so important. You were talking about working on with that book and working with Robert, and that you worked as a team. And I think that's another thing. Executive directors carry so much on their shoulders. Oftentimes, if they're paid, they're the only paid person. And so, oftentimes a board shows up for the meeting, they've got wonderful ideas, and then they're like, bye, see you next month. And I think, this could be a whole nother podcast about boards. But really doing those exercises with the board, like everyone speaking the same language as far as, let's all talk about what our true mission is. Why are we all here? Because if everyone has a little bit of a different reason of why they think your organization's great, or why they choose to volunteer there on the board, or just volunteer in general, then your messaging gets a little muddy. So if you're all on the same page as to who your audience is and what your branding is and what your message you're telling the community is, you've got a better chance of just having this more succinct and controlled message that you put out there. So doing it as a team, I think, was so valuable, like what you just said, and involving everybody at the table, at least a subcommittee. It shouldn't just all fall on the shoulders of an executive.
Well, and also keep in mind this, there's two things I'll add to what you're saying. The first thing is, I'm a big believer in getting buy-in from everybody in the company, because they're the ones who's going to have to execute it. So, if people think that they were involved, that they contributed, that that was their ideas that were involved, they're going to execute and implement that really, really, really well. They're going to love it. They're going to take ownership of it. Yeah. So you kind of have to do that. I mean, if you're the only one doing the project, guess who's going to believe in it? You, but nobody else. They might even think it's a terrible idea and they won't even do it. So, the other thing is you want to get it off your plate a little bit more. But the second thing is, it was interesting. We were working on it. So there was 4 people on my team who were working with me on it, and we were all working together, and it was just a great experience for all of us. But we hadn't brought Robert in yet. And we were working, we were going over every chapter, working through every single one of the steps that he suggested. And when it got to the area of, which was kind of the last part of coming up with a 3-word tagline to describe all the things that we think that we are, we came up with all these ideas, and then we were spending a lot of time on it, and I think we were getting a little frustrated. And finally, I called up Robert and I said, we're getting, because we hadn't brought him on at this point. And I don't think we did. And so then he's like, well, just let me come in for an hour and we'll get it. Within the first 10 minutes, he had it for us. Well, based on all the ideas we had, he was like, oh, it's this, and this. And it's just, for somebody who does this for a living, right? In his case, or you, it's kind of a no-brainer. So but if someone who doesn't do it for a living, it's really hard. And believe me, what I paid him for an hour was a joke compared to what we got out of it. I mean, by this point, he was in his 80s. He was just doing it for fun. He wasn't really looking to make much money. And so the point being is, it taught me bringing in an expert really cuts it down, and you think you're going to spend a lot of money and you really don't. Yeah. So, do you have anything you would add to that, Jen?
Just that I think having that outside perspective is huge. So I, talked about how the first part of my book is really an evaluation of your organization. And I've had great nonprofits that they love the idea, and they bought my previous book, which is similar, and tried to do it. And everybody has their own idea of how things should be run. So it was really hard to execute. So I've gone into nonprofits and I get to be the person who's like, okay, number one, we're going to talk about what your mission is. Number two, let's talk about value proposition. Number three, if there's no constraints, time and money, what would you do? And when there's somebody else in the room who's leading that, it's just easier for everyone else to like drop their title or their responsibility and then just be present and do the work. And so I completely agree that just having that, extra person in the room who they're not involved, they're not tied to what you're doing, they don't have any of this baggage and background, that it's so much easier. It seems like we're geniuses. We walk in and we can just solve all the problems. Well, it's just because our perspective is completely different and because we do this for a living.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say too, and it was that I've used a lot of consultants in my career or freelancers, and one of the key of it, you think you're bringing them in to help you solve a problem, but one of the things you just don't think about is the idea that they're working with lots and lots of other clients, and they have worked with lots of other clients, so they can bring ideas to you because they've seen it before, where you might not have any exposure to it at all. So, they're bringing you ideas too, because they can see that, what you're searching for has been done somewhere else. And that's, I think, really valuable as well. And something that I think is important for you when you are interviewing the consultant to see if they can match what you're trying to do. Have they done it before? Because that's very, very helpful as well.
Right.
So, Jen, well, we're about to wrap this up. I'll let you have the last word, not about how to reach you yet, but, and is there anything else that you would say in regards to this topic, which, really is based on telling the nonprofit story, and despite budget and time constraints?
Yeah. So I think I would just really try to simplify it for yourself the best you can, because this can seem so overwhelming. So just starting with a goal, in this case, it might be just, I need to refine my story. What is it that we're saying? So like, that's your goal. I need to be able to tell my story succinctly and well, or whatever that is. But setting your goal, and then from there, yes, working on the branding, the audience, all of that. But assuming that piece is done, when you set your goal, then deciding what tactic you're going to use to execute this. Like, please don't try to run Facebook ads and do SEO on your website and send a newsletter like all at the same time. Like, start simple, pick one thing that really resonates, with you, that you think is going to be impactful for your audience. And then, like I said, just really make sure you've included a method of how you're going to measure it. So there's nothing worse than starting something and then realizing like, oh, we got busy, so we never checked on how those posts did, or we got busy and we never just saw how many times a QR code got scanned. So really making sure that piece is dialed in so that you can go back to your board or your donors, and go, this is, how this worked. This is how our time and money was spent, and it was good or it wasn't. But really just trying to simplify that for yourself, like one goal, one tactic, measure it, and then move on from there.
Cool. All right. Well, I'd like to thank so very much, Jen Esparraza from the Jen Advantage, for coming on today's podcast. And if you like today's podcast or any of the other 300 episodes we've done, please feel free to share with a friend, and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. If you like today's podcast, please give us a 5-star rating. It's how a lot of people find us. We're in the top 1% of podcasts in the nonprofit space, and it's because of those reviews and because people are really sharing it with other people too. So I thank you for that. And if you're looking for a line of credit for your nonprofit, please feel free to visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Jen, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, my website is thejenadvantage.com. So from there, you can find all my social media handles, contact me forms, links to my books, all of that. My books are on Amazon. And then my social media handles, like on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, is the Jen Advantage. So pretty simple, trying to, keep that branding continuity.
Yeah, there you go. She's talking out using her same idea of how to market. Very good. Thanks for coming on, Jen.
Thanks for having me.
So, it's today, it's December 11th, almost the end of the year. I know many of us out there are starting to get into reflective mode about how your year went. And I always say this at every podcast. You're no good to your family, your friends, and your cause if you're burnt out. And it's so important that so many of the executive directors that I know of, they care about their causes so much that they forget themselves. And you're no good to your cause or anybody, like I said, if you don't think of yourself first every single day. And what does that mean? Take good care of yourself, meditate, exercise, eat right, all the things that praying, everything that makes you feel energized. You need to do that first and not think of that last. So just keep that in mind when you're reflecting this year. Am I burning out? It's a big deal in the industry. If I am, I need to think about myself first every single day. I'll share with you what I do. I make sure I exercise every single day as soon as I get up in the morning, or the night before. I think about what time of the day am I going to exercise today, because that's the thing that keeps me grounded. So I think about that before I think about my kids, or I think about anything else that's going on in my life. And it's really helped. So other than that, I want to thank you for listening to the Nonprofit MBA podcast, and have a fantastic day. I'll see you later.